And today we are focusing in specifically on alcohol. So it's an exciting time in alcohol retail media, and I'm going to talk all about it today. So agenda today, we are going to have a bit of an intro on Alc Media and have introduce our panelists. We have fortunate to have a lot of great experts with us here today. We'll have a little mini roundtable. Then we're going to dive into our Cheers network as digits and how we make this easy within the alcohol space. And then we're going to highlight what's happening at key platforms and key retailers. A lot of the landscape in alcohol retail media has changed significantly, even in the past couple of months. And it's an ever-changing system that we'll want to make sure we do. Before I get into it, a couple of logistics. So we do have a Q&A. So if you have a question and you are a brave soul and you want to put it into the public Q&A, feel free in the Zoom here. There is a Q&A section that will see it. Pending the question, we might answer it live. We might answer it, via type, or we'll have kind of an open Q&A at the end that we can kind of cover off on anything left. So with that, I'm going to jump into the slides and sort of start our conversation. So first, a little bit about Digits. We are an independent retail media agency that's been around for about 10 years. Most of myself and a lot of the team are former retail people, former merchants, former retail media experts working for retailers that have come together as Digits. In the last couple of years, we've expanded past sort of the essentials in food and bev and really gotten deep into alcohol. It's an exciting space. We have worked with a lot of brands and partners, and we are excited to be leading the industry within this space specific to retail media. We also just were announced about a week ago as a member of the Inc. 5000, one of the fastest private growing companies sort of in the US. And so proud of that. Retail media, specifically alcohol or across the board, is really growing, and we're helping brands and retailers really drive this within their business. This is our panel today. So I'm going to introduce the team. So if the team want to kind of pop in, myself, I lead up the Digits team. I have been running it for the last number of years, and I sort of host the webinar today. We're fortunate enough to have two folks from the Bridg team today. So Dan and Rakhee are here. Can you guys introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to meet you. Oh, good. Thanks, Anne. Excited to be here.
Great to meet you both. And from the Digits side, we have Mallory and Dylan. If you guys want to say hi.
Hi all. Thanks for having us and joining us.
Hi, looking forward to it.
Cool. So we're going to bring the panel back in a sec. I'm going to sort of set the stage a little bit about the retail media landscape for those that are maybe newer to alcohol retail media or retail media in general, just sort of where things stand. And then we'll kind of bring the panel back to walk through some details. So as the title of our webinar states, retail media is booming. If you are part of the industry, this should not be new news to you, but it is. What was a sliver of a topic at grocery shop and shop talk maybe 5 or 10 years ago is now kind of the topic number one at conferences you go to. So retail media itself this year alone is expected to grow 30%. There's over 200 retail media networks. I know when I talk to brands and agencies, managing anyone from the biggest marketplace to big retailers to regional grocers, I think the expectation is that every grocer in the future will have a retail media network. How they work together and how they function for brands, I think, is a little yet to be figured out, how to make it all seamless and easy. But retailers, just like they all have end caps and they all have circulars and they all have signage, they are all going to have some level of customer digital connection, which is a retail media network. Consumers as well are sort of obviously leading into the digital trends. About 2/3 times media is with digital, and the average person spends 4 hours on your phone on mobile. Some more than that, I'm sure, but a lot of time to impact people on mobile. And so all of this is driving, retail media booming. But today we're here to talk about alcohol. And when we talk to brands, a lot of, they haven't quite figured out retail media yet because most of them have focused much of their advertising historically on premise. And so that's a different business than your food business or your beauty business. And so whether that be tap handles or umbrellas or menus, these pictures here are just from a local brewery here. If you're in the Minneapolis area called Maynard's, one of the most famous places sort of out west in the summer. And it always has, different brands on their umbrellas, different brands on their menus. And historically, that's obviously been a lot of ways to get liquid to lips and really help people learn about new brands. But with AlcBev retail media, doors in this space are really starting to open. And I think that's what we're going to go through today. So that opportunity is driving. E-com sales is going up. Alcohol audience is obviously quite large, with about half of Americans buying that in just the last 3 months. And the spend is starting to shift to digital. So with that, a few weeks ago, we actually saw a different article come out that we thought stole our webinar title, which is, why retail media boom is reshaping alcohol marketing. But it had this great comment in it that we wanted to use to sort of kick off our roundtable is, retail media now gives brands, alcohol brands, the opportunity to interact with consumers in ways that previously were only available in the on-premise. And now it's really creating conditions to help drive new products back out at retail. And so I think within the industry, this theme is being figured out, and you'll continue to see a lot of growth soon. So with that stage, I will sort of bring back our panel and sort of ask, some questions sort of within the space. So I know, Dan and Rakhee are here from Bridg. You guys, as part of your everyday life, are talking to retailers and brands, as part of your core job. What are you seeing and hearing from them, and what do you think is driving sort of the biggest, shift in the expansion sort of in the alcohol space?
Yeah, good question. I can kick it off, and then Rock, if there's anything to add. I think the biggest thing, there's really three things that we've seen in the market. One is the shift in consumer behavior. So I think historically there weren't these platforms or tools that you could, hop on an app, get a pack of beer or a bottle of spirit delivered directly to your doorstep. So I think the expansion of these third-party platforms, whether it was, formerly Drizzly, now folded into Uber, GoPuff, Instacart, number of others, that has really allowed brands to get in front of the shopper at the point of purchase and when they're in that moment of truth. And then I think with the growth of those platforms, it has allowed, obviously with the growth of retail media networks, a lot of them are at an arm's length of that retailer. So historically, there are, a lot of tied house laws where it made it difficult to work with retailers and be able to advertise that liquor. But given the, the rise of some of these retail media platforms and having that arm's length of the retailer has allowed being able to leverage first party data and become more data driven. So I think those are the three things that we're seeing. Again, these new platforms, the growth of retail media, and then first party data or just data driven targeting to be a lot smarter about that consumer. Relative to David, you mentioned, a lot of the on-premise stuff. They can do a lot of those tools and tactics now from an off-platform perspective.
Yeah, I know with the retailers that we talk to, that are probably second movers in retail media, they're like, well, we'll figure out the food. Food's easy, right? Like there's no legal restrictions on advertising food. And they're like, we're going to push alcohol off. And then, they've launched food ones for a year or two, and they're like, oh man, yeah, we know our alcohol brands, they have money, they want to talk to customers. And they're like, all right, let's dig in. Let's try to figure this out. And I think that's the regulations causes a lot of barriers. And I think that people have been willing to try to work through those more recently than they might have been 5 years ago. And I think that's what we're hearing as well from retailers. But Rock, what about you from on your side? Again, a lot of the legacy here is off-premise, or I'm sorry, is on-premise, right? So like restaurants, bars, et cetera. What are you hearing from brands as far as why they want retail media or the benefits of retail media versus that side?
Yeah, Dave, to your point, retail media has just accelerated in the last 5 years. Retail media has been around for the last 13, 15 years itself. But, with the pandemic coming through, it's really taken off, right? And there's a lot more retail media networks that have, come about recently here. So, there's several reasons why, brands are now shifting and preferring the digital media landscape versus the on-premise advertising landscape. And, firstly, just to name just a few, it's primarily because of the targeting and the personalization that's available here within the digital space, right? We think about, the precise targeting that, brands are looking to achieve, right? You're thinking about first party data that Dan spoken to, but in addition to that, you can target based on demographics, interests, behaviors, geographic locations, and it's even more important, especially for alcohol brands, right? Having, geographic location, making sure we've got the right demographics, the right age group that we're targeting. And it can be tailored to that individual versus more of a broader group. When you think about on-premise, it's typically reaching audiences that are more broader, and you're focused on foot traffic and looking at measurements that may come at a much later stage from these retailers. We think about the differences between the digital versus the on-premise, right? I just touched on it, which is measurement and analytics, which is huge, right? You're investing a lot of money, and it's important that you have the metrics to support the investment as well, which is readily available in real time when you think about the digital platforms and the investment in the digital platforms in terms of like the ad performance. How is it working? You have your standard clicks and impressions and conversions, but how do you get the closed loop reporting? And that's available within the digital space, which is, a differentiator for a lot of these brands, right? Whereas on-premise measurement is more challenging, right? You think about it relies on indirect, methods, which is, did my store do a survey, and how did somebody look at my signage, right? Whereas, I think the measurement piece is a big differentiator within the digital landscape itself. And I'll touch on cost efficiency as well when we think about the digital space versus, the on-premise, right? It's a much more cost efficient way. You can, adjust your budgets, right, to meet the different audiences that you're looking to reach. You can optimize spend, and you can pull your budgets in and out of what's working and what's not working in various different channels, right? Whereas, in-store is more expensive because you think about, the physical store space, and you think about production and the placements, and you're relying on the employees to really help get your signage up and down. Whereas in a digital world, it's real time. You can shift your budgets, and you can add on these audiences that are readily available with deterministic audiences, to really hit the criteria that you need within the market segment that you need. So when we think about, digital versus on-premise, the key takeaways here are, digital allows the flexibility that brands are looking for. It allows the efficiency that you need to make sure your dollar is going where it needs to go. You're reaching the right audience wherever they are in their path to purchase. And then the precision, right? So precision is key in ensuring that you're reaching deterministic audiences, you're reaching the right audiences based on their behaviors and their purchase behaviors, which is readily available within the Rippl network itself. So when we think about these three things, flexibility, efficiency, and precision, it's one of the reasons why it's attractive for brands, right, to consider digital versus the on-premise.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes sense. I mean, I know a lot of brands, there's so much activity set up to earn displays or earn shelf placements. And you obviously, it's not quite media, but a lot of that in store. And, those things talk to anybody walking through the door, but not everybody wants to buy every brand. And I think with digital, you can find the 10%, 20%, 30% of consumers that are most likely to buy your brand, and really find them. And so you can, sift and narrow and whatnot, and focus your media on the right folks that like to shop the stores where you're actually carried versus the stores maybe where you're not carried. And so I think that's a lot of the benefits in retail media. So that was well said. Mallory, what on your end? Because I know you're talking to brands too. I mean, the title, I'd say, of our webinar is Retail Media is Booming. Where does AlcBev fit in, right? And so when you talk to Alc brands, like, where do they think they fit in? Are they up to speed on all the latest, platforms and whatnot? And like, how are they activating today from what you see?
Yeah, good question. I would say it's mixed. I think it's really dependent upon the size of the supplier and the brand. You have some groups where your account manager is also the e-com person and the trade marketing person and marketing, it goes on and on, where you then have, bigger suppliers that have those established teams. But what I'm seeing and what I'm super excited about is where the trade marketing team is now combining forces with the e-com team and the marketing teams. And they're really kind of pooling budgets together and being more strategic, specifically with their retail spends. So I think one that just opens up a lot of doors and a lot of flexibility, kind of like what Rakhee was just saying. You're being more efficient and, you know, financially responsible, I think, with your spending. And then just overall, I think you have a much more holistic view of your business and how it's performing. And then nimbleness too, I think is key. So long-winded, seeing teams really kind of join forces and working together versus separately.
Awesome. Well, I know working together, I mean, the biggest themes, I mean, I talked earlier, there's 200 retail media networks. And so big challenge is fragmentation, right? Like, especially in alcohol spaces more than anybody else, because it's sold out of liquor stores, mom and pops, grocery stores, marketplaces. I mean, if anybody listening on the call, I will vouch for you that the alcohol industry is the most fragmented of any retail media we work with. And so that can be a feather in your cap as you guys figure it out. But Dylan on our call specifically leads a lot of that for regional grocers. And so we manage, you know, some regional grocer business. And so I know that that's a challenge that regional grocers have been fighting for a while. So like Dylan, what are some wins in that space? And how do we handle it there that, you know, alcohol companies can kind of think about?
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. Fragmentation is a huge topic for both my brand and retailer partners. I would say new RMNs seem to be popping up every month, like we were just talking about, especially in the AlcBev space is no different, as retailers are really figuring out and deciding how they want to participate due to the Tide laws. But just knowing so many brand budgets are shifting into retail media networks, we know that the retailers want to open these up. From a brand perspective, I would say the keys to success that I've seen are really first understand your brand's RMN investment strategy, or in many cases here in the AlcBev space, you have to create your own RMN strategy. So what investment rates are you going at? Which retailers and marketplaces are you going to go for on-site versus off-site, first party versus third party, which media tactics, what KPIs focus on? So I think the list goes on, but really the first thing that brands are needing to do in this fragmented world is focusing on what is their RMN investment strategy. After that, aligning their budgets appropriately. So the Walmarts and the Krogers and even a little bit of the Targets of the world are going to get most of the budget because obviously they're the biggest, but also because it's easy and you don't have enough time and enough resources to be able to execute on all of these different RMNs out there. And so, as you all know, there's a lot of big wins and brand share growth that can be driven via those tier 2 and tier 3 retail partners. So you need to make sure you're investing appropriately and dedicating the dollars to those areas. And then I would say the last thing, and this kind of leads to it too, is just efficiency. So like build an efficient team and structure around you. You cannot execute fully customized RMN campaigns across every single network, especially on your own. So brands need to build multi-use creatives, run similar brand campaigns across retailers, align on themes and timing. So it makes it your job much easier. And I would say a final plug for everyone on this call is leveraging industry experts and fully managed service partners to execute on your brand's RMN strategy. As we've seen, brand teams that go from doers to approvers can get a whole lot more done in the fragmented RMN world versus trying to do it all themselves.
Yeah, nobody can pull it off themselves. I mean, I think, you know, if the food industry is any trend that is going to follow, it's just going to get more and more, right? It's not going to it might get less complicated because there's better software and tools, but you're going to be activating at more and more retailers. And I think that trend is not going to go down. It's only going to go up as that business and the tools and whatnot get better. Because as Rock said, the reporting is great. The investment controllability in retail media is great. And I think brands will start to really like that. John, I do see your question. I'm going to ask Mallory to sort of touch in on that on our Cheers network. So there's a question, I don't know if anybody saw it, that popped in around, you know, smaller craft and how do they play if the distribution is always a little bit less. And so, you know, there's some ways within the Bridg platform, Rippl, that the Rippl team will talk about in a few minutes to really go after smaller, more independents. And then there's some like social tactics that's kind of part of more retailer agnostic a little bit that will play in. So we'll answer, I think, that as we go in. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mallory. Is going to walk through sort of what we do as Digits as Cheers Network, which is sort of what we launched. If you see, we had a press release a couple months ago about how we're bringing a lot of this together within the space to try to help brands navigate the changing landscape. So I'm going to reshare my screen and then we will bring everybody back for Q&A later, as if people have Q&As to sort of pop in as it goes. So Mallory, I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Here at Digits, we really recognize the overwhelming number of ways for you all to activate retail media. And that's why we created the Cheers Network. This is really a seamless way for you to activate across hundreds of different places. So marketplaces, third-party sources, different RMNs. It's activating against any of these all through one contact versus 200 plus. And that's through our team. So the verticals are kind of platforms that we've identified here are what we think are kind of those key areas to focus on from a digital standpoint. So marketplaces first. So Instacart, DoorDash, these are great for on-site display, on-site search, first party. So a couple of retailers, platforms listed here. So Walmart Connect and Kroger today are two of the mass retailers that sell their first party data to alcohol vendors. There are some nuances, so I'll chat about those here in just a few slides. The next one is third party preferred. So this is a unique relationship that we have with the Target Alcohol team where Digits only has access to the alcohol sales data. So again, in a few slides, I'll share more details about what that means and what you get with our access. Third party. This list can go on, right? So this is kind of the remainder of those mass retailers, big box stores, grocers, regional grocers. And this is where we can get incredibly customized for brands that have smaller budgets. We geo-target all of our third-party media. So we can be really prescriptive of where we're serving our media, what stores, what states. And then lastly, we have social. So we have our proprietary social handles, as well as, we've utilized brand led, but a way to reach your customer via Meta or TikTok to hopefully get them to convert. This slide really just kind of wanted to ground you all in like the different tactics and channels that our team utilizes when building out retail media plans. So we've got either first party or third party. Social media on the left here, that's utilizing third party as that's activated through Digits specifically. Offsite media, that can be first party or third party. And then when thinking about on-site media, that's really going to be focused on first party. And that's going to be, again, your on-site display or on-site sponsored search. So next, we wanted to kind of dive in a little deeper into a couple platforms or key retailers that we think kind of just might be beneficial. So first up is Walmart and Kroger. So as mentioned, both of these retailers now offer their first party data to alcohol brands. So what this means is that you're able to access known shopper data. So whether it's brand category or a category adjacent item, you can target that individual with digital media. Other unique targeting offerings that they provide, like predictive audiences, seasonal, and one that I really love is new or lapsed buyers. So I think, when you compare first party and third party, obviously first party is that known purchaser, right? But I think you get some additional flexibility and innovation with some of the audiences. And then from a measurement standpoint, because you're using first party data, you are getting true one-to-one closed loop attribution. So what that means is if I saw your ad and I went into Walmart or Kroger and purchased your item, we are able to tie that sale back to the individual seeing the ad. And so you're able to get true, again, closed loop measurement and ROAS with 1P campaigns. Other forms of measurement, you can get sales lift, new to brand, unique household reporting. These these additional measurements sometimes do come with minimum investments. So just keep that in mind. And then a couple other nuances with Walmart, Kroger. Kroger requires an agency to activate. So a brand cannot go to Kroger directly and activate a 1P campaign. You have to work through an agency. And then both do have minimum investments, I think roughly starting around 25K. So definitely pros to, activating with 1P. But let's kind of jump ahead to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit more about the third-party solution that I mentioned earlier. So this is called preferred because of the unique and exclusive access that we have to target alcohol sales data. So at Digits here, we lead the strategy planning and buying of media to really advance Target's alcohol business. The exclusive access to the sales data that we have allows us to provide more detailed end of campaign reporting. So sales lift measurement, as well as market share reporting to our clients. So with the Target Preferred, as well as all of the third-party activations we do, we really focus on finding the right person, right place at the right time. We use a geo-targeting strategy, so very retailer-centric. So again, hone in around what the retailer is, and then find that right person and drive them to convert online or in store. And this last slide, just wanted to give you a visual around how these can come to life. So on the left here, this is going to be more of a third-party activation. We love to use what we call a dynamic ad. So we partner with Pair. And what this does is it allows us to have a one-click to the retailer destination. When using the landing page there on the right, you do see some drop off with that interstitial page. So we do, again, love the dynamic ad because of the one click. There's flexibility with the retailers that are shown here. In this case, we're focusing on Target. So we have the Target listed first. But again, this could be a great example of, I really want to support 3 different grocers that are generally in the same area. I'm going to list all 3 of those grocers and support my item across multiple chains. And then on the right here, the landing page, this is what the ad would look like when activating first party, with the exception of there would be no logo. So first party, they do not allow Walmart or Kroger to be on the media ad itself. But then once you click, there's that interstitial page there where you could drive to Kroger, Walmart, etc. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan and Rakhee to talk about Bridg and Rippl.
Thank you, Mallory. So I can give, if we go one forward, the whole concept of Bridg has been around for about 13 years, and we're owned by Cardlytics, which is a card-linked offer company. If you've ever leveraged any of those offers in Chase, Bank of America, your banking platforms. So we have a really strong, obviously, understanding of merchant level data on the Cardlytics side. But what Bridg set out to do is understand the unknown in-store shopper. And that's how all of the underlying data that we leverage in powering Rippl. And so just to give an example of that, if you are either, the rise of retail media has been predicated on online shopping. So whether you're shopping on Instacart or Walmart or Kroger, or going into a physical location and identifying yourself in store via either the loyalty card or an alt ID. And what we found was there's a number of times where, people either share a loyalty ID. If they're buying just like a single serve or a pack of beer, they're not identifying themselves in store. So our superpower is to identify that consumer who is unknown to that retailer and grow their first party audience. So for example, Giant Eagle, we announced, and Wegmans a couple months ago, what we do is we take a look at, they send us all of their SKU level point of sale data. There's obviously the loyalty file that they have of their known consumers. And then the unknown consumers, we're able to match with our data spine with a number of pieces of information that show up on that receipt: zip code, phone number, first 6, last 4 of their credit card. And we're able to create a digitally safe anonymous profile so that that retailer can then understand that consumer, much like they are a loyalty member. So if I walked into Giant Eagle and never signed up for their loyalty program, they would understand how many visits I'm making, what I'm purchasing on every given trip, basket size, etc. And then if you go on forward, we've actually applied that or aggregated all of the retailers we're doing that identity resolution for to create a almost Uber grocer or long tail network of retailers, much like the Cheers network, but instead of working with 10, 15, 20 regional grocers and convenience stores, you can come to Rippl and access all of that SKU level data directly with us. And so just to give a few use cases or kind of statistics, by merging all of these together, you now have access to 70 million total unique shoppers. These are individuals and all of their SKU level purchase history across over 27,000 locations. So right now, this is a growing network, but Giant Eagle, Wegmans, Schnucks, Alex, Lee, and Lowe's Foods are part of this. And then a really interesting point for the AlcBev space is we are partnered with National Retail Solutions and PDI Technologies. These are in aggregate 50,000 independent convenience stores, bodegas, and liquor stores that we are getting SKU level data from. So as Dave mentioned, there's over 200 retail media networks. Our goal is to make less media networks, not more. And the fact that we've heard from AlcBev players that so much of their volume is from these independent liquor stores, but there's no way you're going to work with, 50,000 different locations. You can come to us. We can build an audience of, spirit buyers, category, not brand, a lot of the things that Mallory had alluded to with some of the other players. You activate that offsite media, and then we can close loop measure all of this offsite campaign data as well. Because if I'm exposed to, let's say, an Anheuser-Busch ad, I walk into an independent liquor store and make that purchase, we're able to definitively give you that closed loop measurement or attribution, whether that consumer is new to brand, their buy rate, and a whole host of additional data and insights. So again, very excited to be part of the Cheers aggregation, but within that, we are aggregating our own retailers and growing this probably 3-4 retailers per quarter, given the value proposition of adding to their first party data as well.
Yeah, I know, Dan, congrats on all the Rippl success. I know it's relatively new. Can you remind, you guys have gone from this to here in the last, when was this number 0, if you will, from a total sales?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, I think Q4 of last year is when we launched or rolled out the Rippl network, and it was Schnucks and the NRS convenience store network. So over the past quarter, adding Giant Eagle, Lowe's, Wegmans, and PDI, this has actually gotten, as we ingest the PDI data, it's actually going to be north of 90 million, which we just heard from our insights team about an hour ago. So need to update this slide. But we have about 4 or 5 other retailers that are about to sign on and launch probably in the next quarter or two. So yeah, I went from maybe 20 million to north of 90 million within 6 to 7 months.
Yeah, and I think the future here is really exciting. I mean, for alcohol, for food, whichever. I mean, some people on the call might, move jobs and be in other brands at other times, right? But being able to kind of aggregate, I made the joke yesterday, bottoms up within this, which I guess is also an alcohol term, bottoms up in the space. But, you might work with Walmart directly or Kroger directly, like the big national ones that have their own first party. And, today they're a closed ecosystem. But I think, Rippl's goal is to kind of build a lot of that on the bottoms up and make this really easy for brands. And I think, the team is really doing a good job there to try to, get this going. And obviously ready to go now. $80 billion of sales is a lot of sales, but I'm sure it's only going to get bigger as you guys are bringing in more and more networks and more retailers into the space.
Yeah, and just to kind of close the loop on John's question, we are very nimble. So because we're working with some of these independents, because we're working with some of these smaller retailers, if you're not able to get distribution in those major chains, we can always pull audience counts based on where you have distribution, where it's located, and execute to encourage some of that trial and drive purchases. So John, if you want to talk offline, happy to, but yeah, we're very nimble in terms of how we're able to do that with craft spirits and breweries.
Well, I'd say that, yeah, for John or any other smaller brands on the call, the great thing about digital is you can kind of make it what you want, right? Like if you said, hey, I only want to talk to brands, stores that are in Memphis, because that's just where we're distributed, right? We only can talk to whatever that geo market is. Digits can manage that through social and geo target, and the stores are carried. Rippl can manage that through their connections and whatnot. But my point is, don't ever be scared to sort of like ask for a proposal of sorts, right? Of sort of what the minimum spends and what it can look like, because people in our shoes are happy to help you pull that together and share it with your brand partners. So with that, I think that's the extent of our content. I know I did want to open it up for questions. We're finishing on time here, which is good. But if anybody, we had some questions sort of come through. If anybody else has questions that they're sitting on, now is the time. Otherwise, you can see here, these are our emails to be able to contact us. Myself, the three of us sort of at Digits, and then the two folks over at Bridg and the Rippl network. So I think people are a little shy with their questions today. So we will, all right, they're starting to come in now. So we'll take a peek. I'll give it a sec to let it come in. But so the question is, and I think Mallory, make sure you're listening, because I think I'm going to have you answer this one, but I'll read it out loud so people see it. And so, how do we recommend an e-com team gets buy-in from brand or trade when a lot of people think of this as only an e-com specific tactic? So I'll add one thought, maybe probably just from a historical perspective, and then Mallory, I had you add. And I think people think of media as e-com only. I would say, I think it's because in the alcohol space, it started with Drizzly and with Instacart, which really are digital only. You had to buy it online, right, to get there. But I think in recent years, it's opened up to more, full-fledged retailers, not just marketplaces. So Mallory and team, how would you answer this question for the group?
Yeah, so I think going back to our campaign reporting capabilities. So like with Target specifically, we can report out on in-store sales lift and digital lift. We also, it's interesting because, with Target, and I think this is probably a lot of the mass retailers, we still see 90% of sales happen, 90% plus sales happen in store. And so while this is an e-com tactic, and while you're driving a digital lift, you're absolutely driving in-store lift. It's the combination, I think, of finding that person where they are on their mobile phone, right? We use 100% mobile media with our third-party preferred and regular. And we know people spend too many hours on their mobile phone every day. And so being able to reach them when they're on an app, when they're on an MWeb, drive awareness of your product, whether they click or not, they're still going to remember that ad when they are in store next. Not to continue talking about Target, but I think Target has a huge awareness problem with alcohol. A lot of customers don't know that Target sells alcohol. And so simply by having that Target logo included in, that dynamic ad example that I showed you, drives that awareness and in-store conversion as well. And then for all other 3P offering, Walmart or Total Wine, again, I think the sticking point here is that a majority of those sales still happen in store.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to give a quick Rippl perspective, because same idea, although it is an online digital ad and you can order online, we are doing measurement in store as well. So to either make the case or build the use case for the trade team, the reporting that comes back, not only are you getting lift or incremental return on ad spend on your brand, but we're reporting it back up to the category too. So you can go to your merchant at some of these retailers or categories and say, yeah, we promoted our brand online. Here were the in-store sales, but here was the category sales lift as well, which kind of helps push that conversation further along.
Mm-hmm,
well, and I think the other, like, I used to be a buyer and a lot of the team was too, but the other way, and this is less numbers. Like Mallory and Dan gave you the numbers focused answer. I'll give you the more like emotional probably is, talking to the sales teams of, yeah, they spend so much time and effort getting that shelf placement, but what percentage of shoppers actually put their eyeballs on that shelf? Like they're walking past it, they're busy, they know what they already buy, like boom, they're grabbing something, they're gone. And like, are they staying in there and looking at your product? And so you might have 100,000 people walk through that store, but how many of them are actually seeing your product? With retail media, we can actually go and find them. And so maybe some of them are going to happen upon it in the store on that end cap you got, but not all of them. And so how do we find them other places, other ways? So that when they come in the store, they already know where it is. They already know it's already on the list. They're not stumbling upon it when they're figuring out which beer to buy, for the weekend. So
yeah, during our last webinar, we talked a lot about that. Is if you have in-store space, you need a digital equivalent. It's your digital end cap. So yeah, exactly what Dave just said.
Want to know our reporting, the percentage lifts in digital sales are always higher just because, again, it's a digital tactic, but there is also, I think, more dollars, incremental dollars actually driven out of the physical purchases just because of the base of business there. That's so much.
Yeah.
One other question that came in is, the landscape is changing so much. How do we keep up to date on what retailers, they can actually activate with, and what is within that? And so, I know on our end, that as an agency, whether that's us as your agency or other agencies you work with, my recommendation would just be to stay in on those conversations. Because what was it? I think Mallory Kroger just launched a couple of months ago, and that's been a pretty quiet launch. It isn't something they've been super public about. And so, when we talk to elk brands, the landscape is changing quite a bit. And so staying close with, if you have a national agency that already supports you, or, Digits, we have a email stream that we send out that we kind of keep people up to date on retail media. And those are good spots to stay up to speed in the alcohol space.
Absolutely. Dave, there was one more question around how to quantify digital and in-store. So I don't know if you see this question.
Yep, I'm reading it now. If you have thoughts, go ahead. Otherwise, give me a sec to read it.
Yeah, it's a good question. We don't necessarily have methodology around that. Dylan, I'm curious if you have any questions or any thoughts around this one.
Yeah, for sure. So the way that I'm interpreting it would be, we obviously see a higher lift on any media that we run the analysis of online versus store sales, kind of to Mallory's point of what she was talking about. We'll see an average of 3 to 5% lifts for in-store sales in our media stores for a brand campaign versus 10 to 15% lifts for the digital channel. So the amount that we're impacting the digital channel versus store is definitely a higher factor. But to the whole point of these retailers, majority of their business, 90% plus for AlcBev, is happening in store. We actually see 60% plus of digital activations impact on incremental dollars happening in store. So our digital media is going to drive incremental sales. That's 60 to 80% of those total incremental sales are happening in store versus digital. So even though we're driving the higher percent lifts, much more of the dollar impact is happening in stores. I hope that answers the question. But
I think part of the question is, how do we know? And I guess to clarify, for any retailer that's offering first party, so Walmart or Kroger or any of the Rippl network, is the reporting should tell you both. The reporting should be detailed out, attributed in incremental sales in store and attributed in incremental store online. And so that should be able to specifically tell you the answers to the question. And with Dylan, for us, when we do our target third party or any other third party, some of that is a little bit more of a math equation in a different way than obviously first party attributed sales is best in class, because they actually follow the same shopper around and see it come through. Yes, when it's not available online, that does get a little tricky, the first party data. I would say, Dylan, but what you just said, even just as a rule of thumb, for us, what is our in-store dollar impact is larger than our digital, right? And so is it like a 1.5x? The digital number is probably maybe even a rule of thumb that if brands on the phone are kind of running P&Ls on their end and they only get the digital number, they can maybe do some estimates on the in-store.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to the point, like I was saying, like 60 to 80% of your sales are happening of your incremental sales are happening in the store channel. So anywhere from 1.5 to 4x is going to be store influenced versus digital influenced.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. I know we just hit the time, and so we will be following this up just with an email and a recording. You guys can have it. Everybody has our contact info. We appreciated the time. Thank you for the Rippl and the digital panelists to coming in today. So Dan, Rock, Dylan, and Mallory, thank you for coming in. I enjoyed the discussion with you all today.